Hello and welcome to the Civil War podcast. Happy you're here today. As you can see, I'm wearing my New York Mets hat. Go Mets! And we'll see what happens. They play the Dodgers today. We'll see what happens. And yeah, I'm wearing an Aruba t-shirt. Don't know why, I just am. So one happy island is what it is. It certainly is. Was fortunate enough to make a trip there, and yeah, beautiful. If you ever get a chance to see it, highly recommend that you do. All right, so this episode we are going to switch gears and now talk about a Union general named William Tecumseh Sherman. Sherman. And we're going to start off with his early life and talk a little bit about this before and up to through Bull's Run today. So he was his family is an old family. They've been they came over in the States and they've been since the 1600s. One of his great grandparents or grandparents was a signer of the Declaration of Independence. Um, and then his father, they moved west, and west meaning to Ohio. So if you think back about those times, west was the Ohio, and they and he actually had experience, and his father and grandfather had experience in the Indian Wars of the Pennsylvania, Ohio area. And actually, the middle name Tecumseh was the name of a chief that his father admired, and his father wanted to name one of the children after this chief, and the wife said no. So the first son was named after her grandfather or something, and then the second son was named after her brother or something along those lines. And finally, on the third son, the dad was able to insert the native name Tecumseh in the middle. So William Tecumseh Sherman, yeah, was his birth name. So, uh, he grew up. His father was on the Ohio Supreme Court, so lawyers and judges. He went to West Point, did very well. He was very well schooled in mathematics, and he excelled in those disciplines. He, was good academically. Uh, you know, when we reviewed Stonewall Jackson, we remember how Stonewall came in, and his basic base education was not that great. He had to work really hard, whereas Sherman, on the other hand, did come with a good foundation and just kept growing, kept improving. Um, after graduating, he joined the military, sent to Florida to participate in the Seminole Wars, and we call it Seminole Wars, but it was more of a scattered fighting and a lot of gathering and relocation type of activities. Then from there, he was sent to South Carolina, to Charleston, here. In his memoirs, he really details what life was like in Florida and in South Carolina, and he talks about the abundance of game and fish. And he actually had a thought of, you know, he actually thought that we were resettling Native Americans into the Oklahoma area. He actually thought South Florida would have been a good place, plenty of land, plenty of game. Um, and that was kind of his thought on that. But yeah, and then after South Carolina, he went to Pittsburgh. He was assigned to Pittsburgh for recruiting, and this was right when the Mexican-American War was starting. Now, as we remember from our previous talks, there was a lot of back and forth going on in Congress, and Sherman was in D.C. And met some of those senators and congressmen that we have talked about in previous episodes. And so when he was in Pittsburgh, he was in charge of recruiting. There was like for Pittsburgh, West Virginia, Ohio, I think. It was good for him because he was actually close to his family. He was able to make trips home. But he was also very eager to get involved in the Mexican-American War because he was assigned to as a recruiter, and he wanted to uh, wanted to go fight for his country. So at one point, what he did was he took a bunch of recruits and left the Pittsburgh area and traveled with them down uh, to St. Louis, where the recruits were going to um, embark on the trip down to Mexico and training and everything. And Sherman wanted to, without any orders, he wanted to, he thought he could lead them down there and get involved. Unfortunately, when he got to St. Louis, severely he was severely reprimanded and sent back to Pittsburgh. But as fate would have it, um, he was then reassigned, and he was assigned to go to California. So, not the was not assigned to go and fight in the military, but at that time, California was still under Mexican control, and so he wasn't going to be he was actually going into a to help establish San Francisco and to support Los Angeles and other communities that were there. So they got onto a boat and they sailed down to Rio de Janeiro. Spent some time there in Rio, loved it. He wrote, and then they went around Cape Horn. And what was really interesting about that was how for almost a month they were just rocked and smashed by waves and wind and terrible weather. It took them so long to get through around the Cape, but eventually they did and made their way back and into California. His adventures in California, there was again, there's some, there's some skirmishes I would say that he was involved with, but not too much. It was the two major things that happened in California was one, he was actually part of launching the gold rush. The gold rush. Uh, he was in with the governor at the time. The two gentlemen brought in uh, some gold that they had found, they discovered, and the nugget was so big that Sherman actually took a mallet, a hammer, was actually able to, smash it down. I mean, it's just like incredible when you think about these things. And the governor then signed that, official gold has officially been discovered here. That led to the gold rush. So he was part of that. That was kind of cool, I thought. In addition, he was helping um, the local military to try to to get established. So remember, this was still Mexican territory. He would go down to Los Angeles to support as well, and then would ride, either take a ship or ride up the. And for me, having lived in California for so many years, it was neat to, when I was reading his memoirs, to hear the familiar places that he was at. Now, when he was in San Francisco, this is the interesting part. There was a local militia, and the army was waiting for a shipment of guns to come in because right now the soldiers basically had nothing. I mean, whatever they could bring. So the shipment arrived. And the militia actually commandeered the ship and was able to secure all the weapons. Um, and this really kind of starts the whole, right to bear firearms. And it's very interesting. Uh, they how the militia took control, and eventually the army did get them back, but without there was a lot of going back and forth. So, but Sherman was not involved in the Mexican War at all. His ability to advance was limited, and because of that, he wasn't able to fight. He was kind of stuck. He left. He left the army. He married and started working in a bank. Uh, After that, the he got a job as a superintendent when there was a bank run and kind of went bankrupt, and so he became a superintendent of a school in Louisiana near Alexandria called was Louisiana State Military Academy, and he was very popular there, and he was very well liked among all the people. Had a lot of good friends down in the South from his time in Florida, South Carolina, etc. So he was very good friends with all the people in the South, this area. And when as we as we got closer to 1860, 61, and all the troubles, he was very vocal um, in his statements of that people didn't know, they didn't understand what they were getting into. He thought that that war was thought of too lightly. When we looked back at Stonewall Jackson, Jackson knew what was going to be required, and that's why he was so strict with his men. Sherman was also, he knew what was going to be required here, and he thought that the leadership, that the congressmen, senators were way too laissez-faire, way too easygoing with this, that they really didn't understand what the repercussions were going to be and how the country was going to just be destroyed from it. And he had very true words before going in. But he was he did reenlist with the Union, and he was part of the Battle of Bull Run. And in fact, if you remember the episode where we were talking about how Jackson was able to take some high ground, get his artillery up there, was able to beat back the superior number of Union forces. Well, Sherman was in that group that was getting beat back, and actually he got grazed a couple times, twice I think. But he wasn't. It wasn't so much that he didn't really make a name because, of course, they got beaten back by Jackson. But what he stood out was in his making an orderly retreat with his troops, and that really stood out. However, Sherman considered that everything was a failure. He questioned himself and his leadership and what happened, and he kept getting rewarded. Lincoln then, made him a brigadier general, and Sherman had expressly said, "Do not promote me. Do not. I don't want any reward for this. I actually am doubting my abilities." But he was made a brigadier general after this because of his good actions. And this was the start of Sherman's mental struggles. And we're going to leave it here. We're going to come back next time and dive into this. The reason, for me, it's important because I feel that, well, number one, I don't think mental illness is given the credit that it's due. I feel that it has always been something that people would hush hush or look down on and consider someone weak instead of looking at it like a true illness. So if you get sick with the flu, what do? You take medicine, right? I think mental illness is the same. It needs to be handled properly and taken care of properly. And when you don't, bad things happen. So we're going to kind of dive into that in our next episode. And well, I hope you enjoyed this podcast, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you.